Welcome back. It's Finding New Films, episode 8. And I'm here with my father. The whole reason maybe this podcast even exists. What's up?
What's up, Hunter? I'm a big fan of the show. I wanted to say that, and watching movies is something that we've always enjoyed doing together. And as you've grown up and become a man and things, and I've been able to appreciate films on all levels. It's been fun to have like a buddy to talk film with. So this is kind of great that it's kind of migrated into a show for you, and I think you do really well with it.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
You'll see the money in your bank account tonight. No, but really, without this guy, who knows if Finding New Films would have ever started. So, cool full circle moment for the pod. So it was only right that he chose the movie. And this week you decided on The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford, by Andrew Dominic, who I had never really heard of before this, but apparently he's a pretty well-respected auteur director. He made Killing Them Softly.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
With Brad Pitt, another good movie. That's one of Tony Soprano's last movies.
Yep. Rest in peace.
Mm-hmm. What's his real name?
I feel really bad about that.
Starts with a G.
Yeah, so welcome back to
That's not a film we're talking about today, so we don't have to know.
James Gandolfini.
That's it.
I went to go look it up, pressing J-A, and remembered immediately. Andrew Dominic. Killing Them Softly is known for a smattering of other little indie movies. But cool guy. Yeah, seems like a cool guy. Seems like he gets like a on a Rotten Tomatoes scale, like a 75 per movie. Respectable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anything you had, what were your initial thoughts going into this movie before we get into any details?
Well, first of all, I'm a big fan of the genre, the Western genre anyway. And, I know that Brad Pitt and all the movies that he works on, he looks at it like a broader, more broad perspective on that. Any kind of thing that he goes to than just like what would be your common run-of-the-mill shoot 'em up Western like we're accustomed to in a lot of things. Right. But, then I think about the Clint Eastwood, The Unforgiven, that he won the Oscar for, the Western. I think it was the first Western that won an Oscar for Best Film, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong on that, but it was a lot more like that movie. But the surprising thing to me, it was even more introspective as a character, and the fact that it was actually a real life human being that they were examining, and not an imagined character. I don't know. It had a lot of the things in it that were important to me. Those underlying themes, like the metaphors and the literary references, and just being good prose, for lack of a better word. I mean, just a good script and dialogue and everything.
Yeah, I can agree. Going in, just thinking, everything that Brad Pitt puts his name on, especially as an executive producer in this movie, is going to have more nuance than, just some random guy making The Hateful Eight or whatever. Not to pick on that movie or anything, but not The Hateful Eight, but The Magnificent Seven, just, a lot of Westerns have very much become like, oh, send it in, and it'll get the views that we want and the audience that we're looking for. And shows like Yellowstone have kind of reinforced that, and even kind of made it even broader into like a Western based in today's society. So I don't know, seeing just a movie that was like a slice of 1882 and just kind of stayed true to the people of the time. That was cool.
And it's not just a story about just some good guys trying to do good in a bad place, and there's 1,000 shot fires, and oh wow, the only two people that don't get killed are the two good guys or whatever, you know. So that there was no like cookie cutter pattern or anything like that. I mean, you can tell that there were plenty of places in this movie where they could have gone for the heartstrings. They could have gone for something more pleasant, but it always came back to the brutal reality of life and just relationships in general.
Yeah. Just, especially within men, in navigating the male ego. The movie did really good with that. I felt like just balancing out how men think, superstitions, all that, paranoia, just a lot of different emotions on full display, and like very raw. I had a note just based on this. The guilt. The guilt is such a nuanced emotion in this movie. I feel like every character has, not every character, but most characters that have the stuff to say in the movie are like they have guilt like worn all over their sleeve, and they show it in many different ways. I mean, that scene, and we'll get into it later. That's getting ahead of myself a little bit, but yeah. Let's go ahead and just get through the runtime and the casting and plot, and then we can talk about the movie itself. So, written and directed by Andrew Dominic, been through that. Score was done by Nick Cave and Warren Ellis. Cinematography done by my main man, Roger Deakins. Then the movie stars Brad Pitt, Casey Affleck, and Sam Rockwell. Filled out the cast with Sam Shepard, Mary Louise Parker, Jeremy Renner, Paul Schneider, and Garrett Dillahunt. So,
and a nice cameo at the end by Zooey Deschanel
and James Carver.
Yeah.
That one, we'll talk about it. Plot goes as follows. In 1881, young, starstruck Robert Bob Ford seeks out Jesse James when the James gang is planning a train robbery in Blue Cup, Missouri, making unsuccessful attempts, Jesus Christ, to join the gang with the help of his older brother, Charlie, already a member. The train turns out to be carrying only a fraction of the money they originally thought, and a dispirited Frank James leaves the gang and his brother. Jesse returns home to Kansas City, Missouri, bringing the Fords, Dick Little, and Jesse's cousin, Wood Height. Jesse sends Charlie, Wood, and Dick away, but insists that Bob stay for helping him move to new furniture to a new home in St. Joseph, Missouri. Bob becomes more admiring of Jesse before being sent away. He stays at a farmhouse of his widowed sister, Martha Bolton, where he rejoins his brother Charlie, Height, and Little. Little reveals to Bob he is in collusion with another member of the James gang, Jim Cummins, to capture Jesse for a substantial bounty. Meanwhile, Jesse visits another gang member, Ed Miller, who gives away information on Cummins' plot. Jesse kills Miller, then departs with Little to hunt down Cummins. Unable to locate him, Jesse viciously beats Albert Ford, a young cousin of Bob and Charlie, who had hosted him. Later, Little stays with Height at Height's father's house, where he has sex with Height's young stepmother. Upon learning of this, Height tracks Little down to Bolton's and holds him at gunpoint, but Bob intervenes, fatally shooting Height. They dump his body in the woods to conceal the murder from Jesse. Jesse appears at the Boltons for dinner, where the Fords deny having seen Little recently. At dinner, Jesse mocks Bob for his idolization of him, leading Bob to become less enchanted with and more resentful of him, especially after hearing what was done to his cousin. Jesse and Charlie travel to St. Joseph, where Jesse learns of Height's disappearance, about which Charlie denies knowing anything. I know, we ain't know nothing.
No, we ain't know nothing.
Meanwhile, Bob goes to Kansas City Police Commissioner Henry Craig, saying he knows Jesse's whereabouts to prove his allegiance with the James gang. Bob assists Craig and Sheriff James Timberlake with the arrest of Dick Little, following Little's confession to participation in numerous gang robberies. Bob brokers a deal with the governor of Missouri, Thomas T. Crittenden. He is given 10 days to capture or kill Jesse and is promised a substantial bounty and a full pardon for Hite's murder. Charlie persuades Jesse to take Bob into the gang. The brothers return to St. Joseph, introduced as his cousins to Jesse's wife and two children. Introduce his cousins to Jesse's wife and two children, and they stay with the family. Jesse wants to revive his gang by committing robberies with the Fords, beginning with the Platte City Bank. During their stay, Jesse becomes increasingly suspicious of the two brothers, not allowing them to be alone together. However, as the stay passes, uneventfully, he later gives Bob a new nickel-plated gun as a token of apology. On the morning of April 3rd, 1882, as Jesse and the Ford brothers prepare to depart for the robbery, Jesse learns of Little's arrest from a newspaper. He suddenly removes his belt and climbs a chair to clean a dusty picture. Bob shoots Jesse in the back of the head with the gun given to him before fleeing with Charlie. They sent the telegram to the governor to announce Jesse's death, for which they were to receive $10,000. However, they never received more than $500 each. The Fords try to capitalize on the shooting, starring in a theater show in Manhattan, which sees them reenacting Jesse's murder, but people soon gradually become more hostile towards the pair, hailing Jesse as a legend and calling Bob a coward. The shows are eventually stopped after Bob loses his temper and beats the audience member for mocking him. Guilt-stricken, Charlie writes down numerous letters to Z. James asking for her forgiveness, but fails to mail any of them. He commits suicide in May of 1884. Bob tries to move on with his life, becoming increasingly regretful of his past actions. And on June 8, 1892, Bob is murdered by Edward O'Kelly at his saloon in Creede, Colorado. O'Kelly is sentenced to life in prison, but he is pardoned after 10 years in 1902.
I just love that. I mean,
Yeah.
that was just like a political popularity move
Yeah.
to actually happen.
And that was the assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford. Yeah, that's for damn sure. There's no way. There's just no way. I mean, yeah, there's so much poetry even in that just to get his name out there or to get him some type of notoriety in politics, that you would allow a guy who was the murderer of the murderer of a murderer.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's just honestly hilarious. For the government to have done that, they basically killed Jesse James by way of a guy who's close to him, and that they're able to corrupt. And then this guy, for no reason, just wants to kill. I guess not for no reason. He probably read all the Jesse James books and thought he could make a name off of himself by killing the man to kill Jesse James. And yeah, just a bunch of weird stuff. And, and the fact that that's what gets him out of jail is like the public at large, like gaining more sympathy for Jesse James for being murdered in that way that he was, and like for who they thought that he was from how it was written. Yeah, sounds like politics.
I was just thinking about what you said, reading off the plot of that movie, and this movie didn't do horrible at the box office, but with a name like that and the nature of the film like that, I mean, it's like a serious, what I would call a serious film, not a movie, right. Which you go for to be entertained with. But just reading off the summary of the plot, I mean, granted, that's the plot of the movie, but it's in no way what the movie's about. Yeah. That's the cool thing about it. I mean, this movie is just all about just a few relationships, and all the people involved with it are manipulative to some degree, or want something from the other to some degree, and it's how it just basically all plays out. And it just, you go back to thinking about it, I mean, from what I don't know a lot about Jesse James. I mean, as much as I am interested about the history of the West and things like that, like the actual factual events as they took place in his life, I'm not really that familiar with. I like Billy the Kid more when I was a kid,
Gotcha.
but from what I understand, this was supposed to be like a really good historical telling of actual events. So when you take that and put it in consideration with what they did with this movie and the plot and everything, and had everybody's motivations calculated, and just the way they told the story. I mean, even if you read the script of this movie, you wouldn't get a sense of what this movie was about because there's just so much that's said by expression, by cinematography, by situations, and reading the script you couldn't tell the sarcasm. There was so many incidents where you say something exactly opposite of what they mean.
Right.
In the movie, and it's like unless you watch it, you can't pick it up. And I mean, kudos to Brad Pitt because he does that. He really doesn't have to say a word as an actor. He's so good at expressing himself. I mean, he can express 10 different emotions in a scene of his you know uh, countenance from the side or whatever, his profile, and then him like just thinking about stuff, and you see like 10 different emotions run through her face. It's really amazing what he does.
Yeah. Something me and Zach noted when we watched him on Ad Astra is like, I don't know who pointed it out, but I think one of us just said like it's so cool to watch him act because you can tell everything that he's thinking from his face. You don't even have to, and that movie doesn't have a lot of speaking, and the speaking is a lot of times just like his inner monologue of like, I need to do this because this is what I need to do. And he's just speaking very matter of fact in those voiceovers, but when you see his face while he's speaking, that says more than anything. Like when he's doing those psych evaluations in Ad Astra, and he's just like going through the motions of it, you can see on his face he's becoming more and more dissociated with those emotions. But at the beginning, he's very pointed, and you can, I mean, in the inflection of his voice can tell a lot too. But he's very pointed, knows he means exactly what he says, and as the movie goes on, you see in his face that he doesn't mean what he's saying. And I mean, I have that. I think I have one of those. My notes is it basically says kind of the same thing. But it's more about the whole cast because a lot of this, so much of the screenplay is unspoken. It's just people's reactions, people's looks. I mean, that scene when when he realizes, when Bob realizes he's actually gonna have to do this, like he's actually gonna have to kill him, is that scene where he basically Brad Pitt's character threatens him by telling him like what happened to that guy George that he reminded him of, and he storms off. Like that's in my head the moment where he's like, "Well, now I have to do it," or that's what put him over the edge to want to have to do it. But in that one scene right before, where I don't remember exactly what's said, but Casey Affleck storms out and he goes and sits in the other room. He just starts crying, and his like body's turned, and then Rockwell comes in and he kind of just stands there with him, and he also, I'm pretty sure it's the scene where he kills him.
Yeah, it's like all a continuation of that scene.
Yeah,
because the one thing I think which disappoints Bob, like in the psychology, is not the fact that he's made fun of or ridiculed. I mean, that bothers him obviously big time, like not being taken seriously. But the only thing that kid wanted, and the only thing that he wanted from Jesse really that would have like made a difference was his favor, just to like him like, kid, you're all right, something like that. That's all he wanted was just to be a part of it. And I think deep down in his heart that Jesse felt like or knew that he just didn't have it in him, to be that. But he was wrong.
And I think it weighs on him so heavily because one of the last things that Jesse ever did was gave him a nickel-plated gun. Brand new, beautiful nickel-plated gun. And that was the gun he used to kill him.
I think Jesse knew it. I mean, in my opinion, I think he wanted him to. Yeah. And I think that, like, the scene at the end, towards the end, when he gives him that gun saying, "This is my apology," it's like, no, you are a cold-hearted bastard just like me. You know, one who's only looks for his own self-interest. And, you know, I hate myself at this point. I'm dying. You know, I've got all these diseases and everything. I don't want to put my family through this anymore. So you want the fame, you want this? Here, you do it. You take me out. Yeah. And that was his way of apologizing to him. The apology wasn't for, you know what I mean?
Yeah, he wasn't actually apologizing. Or maybe he was, but
that was his way of apologizing.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, you're good, but that was the way that he chose to do it, which is pretty cold-blooded. I've already gotten into my notes, Adam. If it wasn't clear enough, we're in the notes part. But yeah, those scenes are awesome. This scene's after the fact where he's like becoming despondent with what happened and Bob is, and he's becoming just like completely like those ending scenes where he just seems depressed. There is so well acted by Casey Affleck. He seems to be a guy who's really good at acting depressed.
Yeah.
He's very, very good at acting depressed.
And melancholy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Depressed and melancholy. That's Casey Affleck.
The Casey Affleck story.
I mean, you just think about like A Ghost Story or that Manchester by the Sea. He's very good at being sad.
Gone Girl.
Was that Gone Girl? That was Ben.
No, I'm thinking, what was that other movie? Gone Baby Gone.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. Yeah. He's really good at being sad. Just keep being sad, Casey. That'll keep us entertained.
Can I make a point here from my notes? It's kind of like going from the beginning of the movie. And it's talking, you know, because we can't talk about this movie without talking about the imagery and the metaphors and stuff. And there was like, at the beginning of the movie, basically, it starts out when Bob joins the gang for the first time. And he's going there wanting to, you know, make an impression and get in good with Frank and Jesse. And Frank is older and more serious. And he's actually, from what I understand, kind of a more religious guy and more like, I guess for lack of a better word, have somewhat more of moral standard than Jesse does. And Frank just blows him off immediately right out of the gate. Yeah. And Jesse just wants to play with him. He's got more of a playful nature. He still feels the same way about him that Frank does, but he's going to have fun with it at least, you know. And right after that scene when he kind of like, he first gets blown off by both of the brothers. I mean, he keeps trying to engage Jesse in that conversation, and all he wants to do is talk to him about the stew and what's wrong with it and stuff like that. Just completely belittle any thought the kid had, you know. And he goes off by himself, even though he got shunned by both of the brothers. He still has it, and then a mosquito bites him. Yeah, and it's like he's bitten by the bug. Yeah, he wants to be all in that group and be everything about it, even though they don't like him.
Yeah. You can also take the metaphor of it being this mosquito as if like he is the parasite.
Oh yeah, good point. Yeah,
that's how I interpreted it when I rethought about that, because I was like, that scene definitely had some meaning, and when I was trying to derive what I was feeling about it, that's how I kind of took it. He's like he's the parasite. He's the mosquito on their gang, and
it could be. Yeah, I think you got more of a
that. That's kind of nails it. I mean, he's a bloodsucker. I mean, like the bard says in the song that he's singing, in Robert Ford's. I don't know if that was in his little saloon, but the bard that was singing in the saloon, he slept in his bed. He killed him while his children was in the house. He's just a straight up coward while he's going to dust a picture.
But you got always remember too that they were a gang of murderers and robbers, so they were basically all parasites too.
Yeah.
So he became just like them.
Yeah.
I guess that's the point. Is like the whole movie is, everybody's saying how much you aren't like Jesse James, and it turns out
he just turned right into him.
yeah, I mean, calculating, cold-hearted, and all that. But I don't think that's. I mean, Jesse seems like. I mean, at least in this movie, I'm not saying in real life, but the way Brad portrays him, that it's like Jesse is a conflicted guy.
Yeah.
He's a father and loving husband when he's at home, but he flips the switch and becomes this brutal character.
Yeah.
When he's not in that.
Yeah, I walk away, I black out, I come back, and hands are red. Yeah, it's pretty unsettling. He makes him out to be like a sociopath, or just someone who can like understand how people feel, but also just uses that to manipulate them, and uses it for his own benefit. And he's obviously a paranoid and delusional person. Because,
that's another point I kept thinking about too. Obviously, Jesse James is one of the first, nationwide famous people from the United States. I mean, is Bob Ford maybe one of the first, stalker killers?
That's my thing.
You know what I'm saying?
That's my second no. This is a case of like just celebrity stalking. I mean, how is this? I guess I want to say how is this, but it's not that much different from like the death of Gianni Versace.
Mm-mm.
I mean, it's just a guy that like loved this guy, never meet your heroes, I guess, and then it boiled up into this thing that he couldn't get out of, and loved a guy so much he had to be the one to take him out. It's such a weird. That's a mentality I don't think any of us will ever truly understand.
Yeah, I mean, it's truly pathological.
Yeah.
Yeah, no doubt.
It's pretty weird. That's all I can say. Yeah.
So that's the point. Another thing. I know we're coming up on a break soon, but what's worse? Jesse, who seems to be in control of himself, but is brutal, even though he knows it's bad. Or Bob, is it worse that he's bad and has no inkling of any sense of morality whatsoever?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question, because you kind of sit there with like, you could see yourself, or anyone watching this movie could see themselves in any which of the characters, I think, and yeah, it's really tough to see yourself in any of these characters.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to see the bits of humanity that you possess being shown in characters that are so cold-blooded and animalistic. So, yeah, I guess it really just depends on who you end up siding with. And it's weird that by the end of the movie, you like pity Jesse James, even though he's a ruthless, cold-blooded murderer.
Yeah.
And those claims of being like a Robin Hood-esque figure are just overblown. So.
Yeah, over the years.
So, yeah. But we probably need to set this break up. So, because I messed up a bunch of them last week. So, stick around. We're going to be right back. We're going to talk more of our in-depth thoughts on the assassination of Jesse James. I'm going to go grab another beer. Yeah. So, don't go anywhere. So, we're talking about the celebrity stalker thing, and then I think that was really the last thing. Yeah, I like the part, like the, what is the word? I like the dynamic of the movie being told to you a little bit ahead of what's actually happening. I feel like it plays into the name of the story really well, or the name of the movie. You already know exactly what's happening by the end of the movie.
Yeah, that's a good point. Is like this. What happens is in the title of the movie, so you're not surprised. But it's still captivating. You know what's coming, but it's still interesting and
Yeah.
mesmerizing the whole way. It's like, how is this going to actually happen? You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Because you just don't see it at the beginning
Yeah.
at all.
Yeah.
Because he seems like Bob, like such a little dweeb, and Jesse just seems like he's got everything together and everything figured out.
Yeah.
But it doesn't turn out to be that way.
It's really funny how uh, it seemed like Casey Affleck's character gets so emboldened by the killing what's his face that he hated, Wood.
The Wood Height, yeah,
Yeah.
He was Jesse's cousin, by the way, his
Yeah.
first cousin, nonetheless.
Um, the way they dumped his body was brutal.
Oh yeah,
Just
and then,
his,
and then I just love the contrast of them giving him a proper Christian burial, but all they do is kick snow over him.
Yeah.
And then they can't remember the rites, as
Yeah.
they were saying.
Yeah.
And Bob, of all people, is the one who has to remind the guy who's trying to give him a Christian burial of what the rites actually are. I just thought the irony of all that was just...
It was beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
They also when Jesse gives a map to the not Jesse Robert gives him the map, doesn't he? He gives him the map of the property and leaves out Little Creek.
Yeah,
where
they
Wood
dump the
Height
body.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought that was a nice touch too. I have a note that says Dick is aptly named.
Yeah, right. Yeah, for lack of a better word, the character, and I would assume the guy in real life plays a womanizer without any reservations whatsoever about what he's doing, and all the other guys in the gang and stuff, look up to him because he reads poetry and stuff, and he has a line, and he talks women into bed, but then you find out that he's going after... I'll let you bring up that
children.
And married women. Not that it was like, the greatest relationship in the world that he ends up messing up, but still, yeah.
Just the scum of the earth person right there. Just it has a line in the movie where he says, "Poetry don't work on whores."
Yeah.
When he was that opening scene where they're introducing Dick Little by having him like belittle the guy, or they're like making fun of that guy who like thinks he's falling in love with a stripper.
Mm-hmm.
She gave me a good price too. That was really funny. That was another one of those scenes where it has to be conversational. If you just read that on the screen, or read that on the script, like you might think it's funny just because it's clever, but the way that it's acted out is so funny. It feels real.
It almost makes you hate Dick more because he's obviously got some sense about him. He's an educated guy. He's not ignorant. And a lot of the guys in the group are just dumb farmers that don't know any better, just dumb eggs basically. And he just toys with them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He could do so much more, than what he does.
It about gets him killed.
Mm-hmm.
It gets him captured. So, yeah. It's interesting. It's a weird. That's a very intriguing character for being a side character.
And I think it's point to say too, to like give the movie some context if anyone hasn't seen it, that again, it's brutal reality, this movie, all of it. There's nothing romanticized about anybody in the movie, from Jesse on down to the lowest guy. And the movie seems like it's moving slowly, and then with the cinematography, they can advance the passage of time just in between the scenes, showing like a line of clouds go by really fast or whatever. But I'm kind of losing my point of thought here, but it's just that there's nothing romanticized. You don't long to be any of these guys. It's really because, Jesse James, even, Mr. Invincible himself, is basically in the night going from one house to the next. Now, a lot of people did love Jesse and would hide him out or wouldn't cooperate with authorities and stuff. In real life and in the movie too, if they knew where he was.
Right.
He could hide amongst the people, so to speak, kind of like Robin Hood would.
Right.
But at the same token, there was such a price on his head, and so many things they have to look out for. It just tore him to pieces. Having to be, he didn't sleep. He had insomnia. He was constantly going back after. I think another good point they made during the movie, the narrator is like at this point everyone had ridden with the James game were either dead or captured.
Yeah.
So he really didn't have anything left to choose from but all these scrubs that were still out there. Nobody else wanted to ride with Frank and Jesse because they all ended up dead or in jail. So that's where he was. And but yeah, I mean there was no ride in a blaze of glory and get a whole safe full of gold and run off. It was hard, tough life that they. I mean, granted, they stole money and they were comfortable because of it, but they were constantly on the run. It was just a brutal life,
Right.
That's all.
Yeah. No, you're right. Yeah. Piggybacking off that, I mean, like, I have a thought that just says, Jesse is a malicious and delusional person and is torn apart by his own bravado and paranoias. But then I want to also say this is like one of the only times in a Western movie I've seen cowardice and paranoia be given actual human consequences and be shown in like a super realistic way. Normally, cowards in like a Western movie is like a farmer that stands up to the main bad guy, and it's like, oh well, you're not a coward. You're not cool for standing up to me. Like you're also a coward, or you're gonna shoot me in my back or something. But like the scene where he goes and kills or not kills, but he goes and beats up the little boy, and then he's like crying afterwards. I feel like is a great example of that. But even him going to kill Ed, I mean, Ed is visibly terrified the entire time. Visibly, and his voice is shaky. He's so afraid of Jesse because he knows what's going to happen, and that's exactly what happens. That was really intriguing. For that whole 10 minutes, I don't want to say 10 minutes, but like whole 5 minutes, his character's on the screen. After that, like initial introducing of him, he's just terrified. I felt like that he played that so well.
Yeah,
just the terrified.
I do, and that scene, the cinematography. We haven't really touched on it so much, but it's so good in that movie because, I mean, it's a scene of Ed, who, by the way, for some context, had conspired to turn Jesse in for a reward. So Jesse gets wind of it and is coming to see him, and he lives out in the farm in the middle of nowhere. And the cinematography of this guy looking out his window, and he sees a lone horse riding through the snow towards his house.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's a long shot, and then it kind of like blurs until he's right there at the door, and it's just like a ghost that's coming to get him. And he knew exactly what it was and what he was coming for. Yeah. It's just so ominous. And he has Jesse riding up on people's houses like 3 or 4 times in the movie that way.
Yeah.
And it's like, what's coming. I mean, it's like death is coming.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say that would be the metaphor there. Death is coming because he's always in black. So he's always ready to mourn somebody. So yeah, death rides in the night. Death rode in on a white horse. What's that quote?
Like hell was coming with him. Yeah, that's biblical.
Yeah,
hell coming with him.
He came in riding on a white horse, and his name was Death, and hell came with him. Something like that. But the cinematography is incredible. Roger Deakins is one of the best cinematographers to ever have done it. Man, he's almost 90 years old at this point.
Wow, I didn't realize he was that old.
Yeah. So this movie, 15 years ago, 16. So
I'm assuming he's passed by now.
No.
Oh, he's 90 now. Today,
yeah.
I thought you were saying 90 when he made this movie.
I think so. I think that's right.
But while you're looking that up, I wanted to make one point so we'll have to go back and revisit on that scene. Jesse had gone to the house of the other co-conspirator who was going to turn him in, and he wasn't at home, but there was a kid there, it was maybe like 10 or 11 years old, that was actually a young cousin of the Ford brothers. And I mean, Jesse James is like, doesn't give this kid a break at all. I mean, he manhandles him like he's a man and drags him out to the barn and starts smacking him around and stuff. And he brings, he bring Dick Little with him, right?
No, he brought. Yeah, you're right.
He brought Dick with him, and I was like, of all people that you would bring, why would you bring Dick with you? You're already so suspicious of the guy now as it is. But I think the only reason that he brought someone in there with him is because he didn't trust himself with his own brutality anymore at that point. I just think he brought him there
because he knew he was going to be the only person
that could have been able to like tell him when to stop, or know what the limit was. His brother used to do that for him all the time, and now he's not there anymore.
Yeah, he needs that person to right the ship for him because he's not thinking right. And
then you look at Jesse in this movie up until that point, and he'd been so calculated, so brutal. It's just like no conscience whatsoever. And then that scene, for like no unconscionable after they're leaving, at that point he breaks down and he cries. I mean, he doesn't just like tear up a little bit. I mean, he's weeping, sobbing. And even Charlie is like, no, that was Dick at that point. You all right, Jesse? And, and he just jumps on his horse and literally rides off into the sunset. A dying sun. Yeah, that was another great cinematographer moment.
Yeah. He has so many. The cinematography is really crisp. I really enjoyed the contrasts. There was a scene where Casey Affleck and Sam Rockwell are both in brown jackets, white shirts, brown pants, and then they're in a wheat field, and the background is orange, and yet you can see every color so clearly. It's the contrast, the ways they specifically use contrast in certain scenes where it needed more like depth. It felt like it was just so colorful. And then in those scenes where the life had to be sucked out, it was like blues were heightened, and everything felt so blue, but then the points where they were trying to romanticize felt so vivid and colorful. Of being like, the times where they're outside and they're just sitting around, those are the only times where they truly get to experience life. But when they're actually living their lives, it's so cold and gray.
Yeah, it's like, even in the house, it's just silence, just their voices, and just looking for ways to entertain each other.
And most of the time, they're looking outside.
Yeah. Just gazing out the window. Those scenes with the wheat fields, I thought of that too. And, yellow, metaphorically or symbolically has always represented decay.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then a majority of the movie is shot in and portrayed in the dead of winter with snow on the ground, and it's cold and it looks cold and you feel it too, and death being winter being death, so to speak. It's I mean, it's everything from the acting to the tone of the movie to the cinematography really came together to make it work. I don't think if you were missing any of those components, because the movie does kind of move somewhat slow.
Yeah.
Without those components all working together, I don't think it would work. But with them all there working perfectly, I mean, you can sit there for 2.5 hours and not feel bad about it. Not that I would feel bad about this movie anyway, but still.
I think I had that as one of my notes. This movie feels slow while you're watching it, and then you look at the time left on the movie, and you're like, wait, what? How am I halfway through the movie?
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like the scenes sit with you, but they're not slow. It's a game. It gives a brisk pace, and it gets through it fine. But I don't feel at any point where I'm like, oh man, this is dragging, or nothing feels out of place or extra.
Like, I think of another movie like Dances with Wolves, and I mean, it's not 2 minutes. That's a 3-hour long movie. But you feel like you've been in that theater or watching that movie for a year when it's over because it's so encompassing, and But this movie is just like you were just there for this little segment of time and got to see what happens.
This movie's very deliberate with
Yeah,
what it's
deliberate's
going.
a good word.
It's very, very deliberate with what it's trying to do, and it knows exactly what it wants to do, and it does that and gets out in a good amount of time. I have a note that says Sam Rockwell is great at playing a calculated oaf. Just a guy who knows when to just be like, you know me, I'm just an idiot, and how many times that got him out of actually like having to fight somebody. Well, specifically Jesse, but like many times he was able to just be like, it's not a thing, or like that scene where he's trying to come up with something to talk about other than what Jesse very obviously wants to talk about, and yeah, I don't know. His acting was really good. I feel like all three of the big people's acting was really good.
Yeah. Another thing to mention about that, excuse me, I forgot the point I was going to make. I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
It happens. I'm 51, so
no, you're good.
I'm entitled to a moment like that every once in a while.
I love the disposition of Jesse telling the story of what happened to Ed versus them showing the reality of what happened to Ed. I thought that was an interesting way of showing how he perceives life, and then to how he's showing, everybody who he is. And like, then when he tells that story, you start to wonder, are these authors really trying to like overblow, his story, or are they really, creating the aura of Jesse James, or is Jesse James walking around and creating the aura of Jesse James by talking to all these authors and lending them these stories, because he tells a story to a guy he really trusts, and maybe not so much by that time in the movie, but he just bold-faced lied about killing a guy that, Charlie really loved.
Mm-hmm.
And then even Charlie, after almost killing Jesse, is still kind of like, I don't know, we should have done that. He's like, he killed Ed. What are you talking about? He's like, I don't know, I still don't think it's a good idea. I thought that was great.
I remember the point I was going to make now. Yeah. With Charlie. Like of all the gang, like whenever anyone like tried to conspire against Jesse or told him a lie or something, he could pick it up immediately. But like Charlie was the only guy who was charismatic enough, because it wasn't being smarter than other guys, because the other guys were clearly smarter than Charlie, but he was charismatic enough where he could like pantomime at least his way through, a situation where it makes it look like he's just being normal and nonchalant, where everybody else just like immediately before he, the moment he walks in the door, it just throws their cards on the table. You know what I mean?
Yeah. He was really. Yeah, I don't know. I think we said all that needs to be said about that. Sam Rockwell is very good at playing an oaf. He's like, oh no. You know what happened. I love the James Carville pop up. That was so random, but he did a good job. Mm-hmm. That little monologue was good. That's all I could say. Not too much to say. He didn't do a crazy good job, but good enough for a guy who doesn't act. Love the subtlety of the dialogue. Talked about the brown contrast. I think another like nail in the coffin for for Robert was seeing Jesse with Z, Martha. Z was his wife, right?
Yeah.
Martha was not his wife.
That was
okay. I got them mixed up.
I think that was she was a widow that was friends of the gang to some degree, and so she was kind of like an outlaw herself, and she had some money left over, and so she kind of created a haven for the guys. And
I got you.
Dick had tried to nestle his way into that house too, and she kind of spurned him.
I got you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Even though she was a widower and actually needed a man. I mean, those days,
yeah.
Anything that Walt would do for a woman, But, even though he was a talker and everything, she was smart enough to know not to get involved with that guy.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I got them mixed up. But we'll talk about it when we get back from the next break, because we're already done with this section. My camera's being weird and only let me record a certain amount of time right now. So we're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back. Okay. So to finish
We're
up,
back.
we're back. We're really back this time. But yeah, probably gonna switch to the phone camera. But I felt like there's a lot of great cinematography in the dark in this movie. I guess it kind of goes back to the contrast point that I made earlier, but just the level of intimate moments that happen in the complete dark. You're still able to see everything that's going on. It's kind of something I praised with Hoyt Van Hoytema and Ad Astra. It seems like Brad Pitt likes to make good movies. It's weird.
Mm-hmm.
But both of those movies have so much setting in the dark, and both of them do such a good job of contrast in the dark. Well, they are two of the greatest cinematographers of the modern era. But nevertheless, they still did a great job. And there's that scene where Casey Affleck's character, Robert Ford is watching Jesse James sleep, basically. And he's noting where there's a gun. He knows there's a gun on the table. And he goes to get up. Click, 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 click.
Mm-hmm.
I need to go to the privy. You think you do, but you don't.
Yeah. And a tear comes to his eye because he knew if he would have made any fast movement, he'd be dead at that moment.
I thought that was really good. A really, really good thing from Affleck. Just the single tear rolling down the side of his face.
I just remember you mentioned the scenes about the cinematography in the dark. I just remember the opening train robbery scene, which happened to be the final one that James Gang actually did, even though they went on to conspire like 10 dozens more than they never did. But there's a scene right there at the beginning where the gang is all lined off to the side of the train tracks where they put up the train block or whatever to stop the train. And as the train passes, they're in complete darkness and they're dressed with their rifles and some have hoods on and stuff. And you just see the passing lights of the train. So you just see flickering images of them, and it's so ominous. And you got to imagine, a pretty well-to-do person traveling by train from, to wherever they were going, and to be stopped in the dead of night and that walk onto the train has got to be like terrifying. I mean, just the intimidation factor alone probably helped them out a lot.
Yeah, and I mean, even when they get on that train, like, imagine not speaking English.
Mm-hmm.
As that one Dutch guy, I mean, he has an idea of what's going on, obviously, but like, I don't know what these guys want. I don't know if they're about to kill me, but yeah, that shot of the light seeping through to the woods and having it shine on them was really a good choice.
And they really did. I can't even conceive of the way they did that, because they did this in a couple of scenes where they did it with Ed's murder. When Jesse took him out, which actually ended up being a flashback in the movie, which I thought was really cool because you just assume Jesse killed Ed. But they never showed it until later on in the movie when Jesse tells the story of what he did. And I mean, they show it. And the spotlight's on the faces in that movie because everywhere except right in their faces was pitch black. And you can see the emotion on Ed's face is like, I know I'm a dead man. I'm going to die.
Yeah.
and he becomes increasingly more dreary or dreadful as they ride along. I mean, it was just incredible cinematography.
Yeah. They are really, really good choices all around in that scene. Yeah. I'm kind of losing. I'm almost out of little points here, but I have one that says "Kill your idols." Little Sonic Youth. Yeah, love that song. Is pretty much an antithesis of this movie. You know, just kill your idols. But Jesse dying by the gun that he handed to Robert, just poetic in itself. We had talked about that a little bit earlier. Did you have any more points?
Well, I really think that Jesse got to a point where his life, I mean, obviously, with Frank deciding to retire and not want to do it anymore, I mean, he lost. I mean, Frank was like his big brother in real life. I mean, it was his, grounding station. And when he no longer had that, all he had was a bunch of these goons to hang around with now. And he had to call all the shots, and it wasn't up to his brother. I think the weight of that and going back and having to cover his tracks all the time and plus he probably had lung cancer based on the hints that they gave, and he had unhealed bullet wounds he was riddled with in his body. I mean, his days were numbered, and he knew it, and he knew he was a burden on his family and all this and that. I don't think that he wanted to live anymore. I mean, at least as in the portrayal in the movie. I mean, it's obvious at the end of that movie that Jesse put his gun belt down and said, I'm not going to be protecting myself, and I'm going to turn my back to you. And, just do it. Yeah. And I want you to do it. And that's my gift to you because, you know what I mean? You wanted to be famous. You can have it, kid. You know what I mean? That's my gift to you. And I'll even give you a nice, pretty gun to do it with. I think it was all planned. But saying that, Jesse seemed like he was the master of his world and that, he knew everybody and what they were thinking and doing and everything. But, I mean, did he really? He just thought he did because would he have been so paranoid and so vindictive and relentless about making sure people aren't coming after him or turning him in and stuff? I mean, he would leave. If he had a hint that there was something out there that was going to finger him, I mean, he'd go take it out. And I think he was just tired of living that life, and especially living that life for his family and young children. So, and one other point I want to make before I think about it is towards the end of the movie, and all along in this movie, I mean, there was serious Judas references, were a traitor within the family. I mean, you almost had scenes where when Jesse went home that final time and he took the Ford brothers with him, it's just like Jesus, the night before he goes into Jerusalem, pray, asking the apostles to pray with him, and that's when Judas went off and saw him. I mean, I said it's so prevalent and it's right there, and I just love the fact that they're not saying anything about it. And then at the end of the movie, it's in the epilogue part, well after Bob had killed Jesse and he went through his small period of fame just for the novelty of it, and then people just hated him for killing a legend, basically, at the end of it. Doggone it, what was the point I was trying to make? Oh, yeah, and he did meet a woman that apparently at least loved him somewhat, that he could confide in and talk with and stuff, based on his diaries and stuff, what the movie was based on. And he told her, later on that he couldn't really even remember that much about killing Jesse James, that
before he
remembered picking up the gun, and the next day it was Good Friday.
Yeah.
The next thing he knew, it was Good Friday. I was like, oh. I felt like I was dead on that, but I just wish they wouldn't have said it almost,
They said, next thing I know, it was Good Friday, and I was reading his obituary.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Yeah, that was. Yeah, I didn't really put all that together, but that is pretty interesting. Yeah, it
And then
wasn't.
and then one last point related to that, and then I'll
Hmm.
shut up.
Okay.
um, it's another like hidden metaphor I think throughout the entire movie. Um, you know, Bob was happy for the fame and reveled in it, and then when it faded, I mean, he kind of like got a grip of what fame was.
Yeah.
That it's just such a
He
flash in the
finally, yeah,
pan.
he finally understood how Jesse felt.
Uh huh. Exactly.
He says that in the movie. I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure he has a line where he says something to the effect of like, when I killed Jesse James, I was a kid and I didn't have like any life experience. And I would imagine what my life was like when I was 34.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, yeah. And then he realizes, he takes a step back and he realizes he is Jesse James, or like who we thought. He's exactly who he thought Jesse James was, type of
Mm-hmm.
thing.
And
Um,
there was a point in the movie very early on where Jesse was just having a regular conversation with Bob, and he says, I mean, it's pretty obvious. Everybody can see it, but he actually tells him, which is kind of odd because all throughout the movie, Jesse says things and means other things. But there's little like hints about like I know you're lying or I know you're not being honest with me. But he says something completely different, like he's cool with it. But at this particular time, he says, I can't decide if you want to be like me or you want to be me.
which is it?
Which is it? Yeah,
And so he's
exactly.
watching him take a bath.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, "Well, I know two things about you. Uh, one is, what is the first one? What was the first one?
But I don't think
Yeah, it doesn't really matter.
yeah, but the thing of it is like, I don't think he wanted neither. I just think
Yeah,
he loved the idea and imagining him being in those situations rather than Jesse or,
yeah,
him wanting to be the guy, not Jesse. And that's all he wanted from Jesse was just acknowledgement or favoritism or just saying, hey, you did a good job. But he didn't give him that. But he did, by killing Jesse James, he did become Jesse James, but he didn't become Jesse James. He became Jesse James' guilt
yeah,
and regret. That's what this whole movie was about, was regret. And every last one of them had it, and it ultimately ended up on their own demise.
yeah.
Or the living a happy life.
Yeah, regret and pride.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I can agree with that. One of my notes is that Bob was mortified that he immortalized Jesse James,
Mm-hmm.
and it mortified Charlie so bad he killed himself, and he didn't even pull the trigger. That was the one thing that was really interesting to me, having so much regret. He wasn't even the one that pulled the trigger. It was like the fact that Charlie felt more responsible for it than the man who actually killed him was
Well,
pretty
he
interesting.
introduced his brother
Yeah.
to Jesse.
Yeah.
So he
I
does
feel
feel
like that would have happened
responsible.
anyway. You know?
I really feel like Charlie felt indebted to Jesse for the opportunity and that he felt like his brother, although it was a little weird that he was so mesmerized by Jesse but he still didn't think he would go that far. I don't think I mean, everybody looked at Bob as like some idiot simpleton, like just some kid.
Yeah.
But all it takes is a little courage and putting a gun in somebody's hand, and it can make anybody into a killer.
Yeah. And then his little experience with wood height.
Oh yeah, remember that in the scene in the movie? That was a really important part too. When you talk about that because basically, um, this one guy's coming to get revenge against the womanizer Dick Little for sleeping with his dad's wife.
I thought that that was more telling of why Robert Ford's a coward than
Yeah.
anything.
And so, I mean, there's no reason he has. I mean, Dick does nothing but make fun of him, so he's not like saving a friend's life or anything. But he has a choice when they're basically shooting each other. He can shoot one or the other, and stop this, or like intervene and say, hey, you gotta stop this. But he doesn't do it. He shoots Jesse James' cousin in the head, and it's like no remorse. It's like he doesn't even flinch about it, and it's like that character changes right there. It was like up until that point, he had not killed anybody or murdered anybody.
Yeah.
But the moment that he killed Wood Height, then there's no longer any difference between him and Jesse.
Yeah.
That he's a murderer too. And then he starts like smirking off and sarcastically responding to anybody that questions anything that he does.
Especially Jesse when he comes back around.
Yeah, it's like, I'm the same as you now. You don't have no right to disrespect me.
Yeah, I killed your cousin.
Yeah, and you don't even know it, and I got away with it.
Yeah, and you think I'm a little simpleton.
Mm-hmm.
And I got Dig Little captured.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I'm sure he feels like his own little... He feels like a little Westerner in himself, but I mean, it only takes 2, 3, 4 scenes for Jesse to take back over as an alpha. I mean, that where he threatens them when they go out to the poppy field or whatever. I mean,
yeah.
They get shaken to their boots, and then we talked about him wanting to go to the bathroom and getting put in his place. Those scenes are so telling without, again, not having to say very much, but you just see the consequence of their words more than their words in those scenes, and that's what's beautiful about it. Is that you see the direct consequence, not
exactly
the action of them speaking. So
meeting up with the posse and getting away, it wasn't that. It was real, brutally real, in a lot of ways. It wasn't really graphic though, I mean, it was graphic.
There was that scene where you saw the back of Ed's head pop off, and then
it could have been, I guess.
And then there was another really graphic scene for no reason. It was like way out of place, in my opinion.
Only where it needed to be to make a point, though. I don't know. We could argue that till the cows came home, I guess.
I don't know. Yeah, for a movie that's so unassuming, and then just to have like those random spurts of extreme violence, I don't know. When Tarantino does it, at least you know it's coming and it's played up and it's over the top. But that just, I don't know. I guess that goes with the realism of the movie. Of it's like, you can try to romanticize death as much as you want to, but at the end of the day, it's like sometimes somebody's head just kind of concaves when you shoot them in the head. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sometimes, their skull just
that's another thing about it. I mean, the death here is being, when we compare it to a Tarantino movie, is being used in a different way.
Yeah.
I mean, Tarantino is looking for, like...
surrealism.
Yeah, exactly. And it's the exact opposite in this movie. Because, like, none of the death scenes or none of the, like, climactic scenes are really built up.
Yeah.
They kind of just happen. Just kind of like they would happen in real life. I mean, if you were going to murder somebody, I mean, as you're going over there wouldn't be dun, 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 music, playing in the background. You'd just be riding there with all your thoughts and stuff. And this movie does a really good job with that. Is like you see the people's journeys that they're on, like just in their thoughts or whatever, of how they get to where they're going to be.
Yeah. I will say the score is pretty non-existent.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I think that would have made this movie better. Just a better score. Just a more fully realized score.
But I do think that, like, the silence of the movie or the simpleness of the sound or lack thereof sound is part of... I mean, I'll give them credit for that. Or, like, not give them credit for it, but, like, give them a break on the score to somewhat, because I think it was somewhat intentional to create the tone that they wanted in the movie.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I don't know, though. I just feel like there's, like, clicking noises with the guns could have been better incorporated into the score, because it's kind of like, with last week's movie Apocalypse Now, I mean, the way the choppers and the gun sounds are so, heavily influenced through the score. I feel like, that click noise. They used the click noise a lot with the gun. I feel like you could have put that into the score a little bit heavier because I feel like that would strike fear in anyone because they know what that means. I mean, they're about to die, and I feel like creating like a heavier score when that click could have been just the start of like the fear that runs through men when they hear that noise. And I just didn't get a feeling that it was really that important that someone brought their gun out when it should have. In the text of this movie, it should have been like the most important thing that happens because they all know.
Mm-hmm.
I just feel like a heavier score could have done something.
My biggest problem with this movie, and I know this is probably going to sound stupid, but I just thought the epilogue was too long.
I'll agree with that.
Because, I mean, it just felt like they did such a good job of telling the story, and everything had an exact amount of time it needed to be told, and then, you know, the movie goes on like 30 more minutes after Jesse's assassinated. Do we really need to have that much time to tell what happened to Mark Ford? I mean, it's not. I mean, I guess it is sort of his movie, but it's not really his movie. I mean, I don't consider him the number one character in that movie. I don't think he's the. Well, I guess he is the driving force since he killed him, but I don't know. I just thought that was just overdone because you're just so tired at that point and just worn out from it. Yeah. And not that the movie does that; it's just the story does that. Yeah. You know what I mean?
I can agree. The scene with the bard where they're like, Robert Ford is a coward, da 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 da, and then he like slips on the floor on his way to be like, oh fuck you, like that just could have been.
I hated that whole thing with the guy walking through at the end with singing that Jesse James song. I was like, just take that 3 minutes out of the movie.
Yeah, just take it out.
That was my only problem.
That scene could have gotten deleted. I'll agree that the epilogue, you're just like, all right, let's get it over with. Like, we know what's, like, we get it. He's a coward. We got it. Thank you, Dominic. You can wrap it up, man. But I feel like, I don't know. It also paints his despondence and like how over the time he becomes less and like more and more sensitized to it, to the point where he just becomes an absolute recluse of a person because of what happened, and then he dies. He gets murdered because of it. Yeah, all the insecurities he saw in Robert Ford were all insecurities that were prevalent in his assassinator, and yeah, and they all we didn't get to see his story, but I'm guessing it was the same type of loop that all the guys in the movie took.
Yeah.
So
Bob got Jack Ruby'd.
Yeah. What he shot? Oh yeah.
Jack Ruby shot Lee Harvey Oswald. Yeah.
Yeah.
Assassinator of the assassinator. Arguably of an assassinator.
Heyo.
Hey, we're gonna get into that.
We're gonna get into the list, and we're gonna finish her up. So, if I can click on it, for the love of God. Okay. So we got the assassination. Okay. Jesse James right here. Okay. So I'll go ahead and give my rating. I gave this movie a 7.5 out of 10. 75% out of 100. What was your rate?
I gave it an 8.
So altogether, it's a 15.5. And it looks like it's going to be tied in 6th with Mulholland Drive. And I think that's right. I think that's about right.
Well, I think what keeps this movie from being great is everything. The movie is beautiful. It's shot well. Mm-hmm. If you're ever in the mood for like a good serious drama movie, like it's a good Sunday afternoon type of movie.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of thing. I mean, if you're going into it thinking that you're going to go watch like a Marvel movie and just be blown away and just on this roller coaster ride.
Or
It's not like that, but I mean, it's a serious drama that makes some serious points about human nature. There's cool metaphors and literary things in it all along the way, which for me makes it extremely cool.
mm-hmm.
But, you know, its scope is somewhat limited.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It says what it needs to say. It does it very well. It's a beautiful film, but you know, in the human condition, I mean, basically, you're just looking in the lives of murderers and thieves and stuff, and you're like, maybe that's the point of the movie is like making all these guys human to some degree with fallacies, you know, regret that it wasn't all that, and that's the point of it.
Right.
And you know, to someone, it's probably less for your generation, but even more so for the generation ahead of me that grew up on watching westerns. You know, so much of it, you know, is romanticized in folklore and history and on TV shows all through the decades up till now. And you know, it's somewhat revisionist history, and we're going back and look at things now, but it's like, no, it was awful. It was brutal. I mean, life expectancy was like 30 or 35 years old.
Yeah.
You know, it was just brutal conditions, and it wasn't
a cool thing.
Yeah, it wasn't. It was a horrible time, and you had slavery, and then gentrification, and you know, all kinds of people being brutalized at that time. It was just a horrible time. And that's another thing, and the last point I'm gonna make that there wasn't any people of color in the movie.
Yeah.
And I mean, it did a really good job of portraying the time period.
Mm-hmm.
But I just felt like that it was like purposely done because I felt like they just didn't have time for that. you know what I mean? I don't know if that's truly the case, but I mean, this movie had a point to make, and it took a long time to do it. And you know, I think anything outside of that to a certain degree is just going to be trying to put too much in there.
Yeah. I mean, it established he's a Confederate sympathizer in like the opening scenes of the movie. So it feels weird to do that and then not revisit that at all.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
And just not even in the background or in passing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It just seems like a.
If you're just gonna tell Jesse James's personal story, then I think leave his.
Yeah, I think not having it enables you to have more sympathy for Jesse James. In this movie.
Yeah, and we probably don't need to have that much sympathy for the guy. So yeah, I guess that's a good idea.
Well, we could talk all night. Yeah. We'll talk about a different movie next time.
Yeah, we will. And more than likely it'll be my choice unless something changes. But I think we've said all we needed to say. I mean, I've got some themes I can run through. Youthful ignorance, humanity is imperfect, pursuit of higher purpose, regret, remorse, pity, sociopathy, man versus self, man versus man, and man versus ego. I mean, I feel like that pretty well encapsulated.
And just one last thing I just remember real quick that I'm going to say is that Bob looked at Jesse like a god, and when after he killed him, it's like he killed God, that his life no longer had purpose.
Yeah.
Because he killed his life's purpose.
Yeah. Just like Tom and Jerry.
Exactly, right. Good point.
Yeah, just like Tom and Jerry.
Mm-hmm. Itchy and scratchy.
Yeah. That's what we got out of this movie. It's just The Simpsons. Yeah, I think with that we're gonna sign off because we've been here for a good amount of time. Yeah, so
thanks for watching.
We found the Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford, and then next week we'll figure it out. Still figuring that out. But I'll probably have it by the time we're posting, or at least try to. So stick around for that. Follow us on Instagram, Find a New Films Podcast. Follow the Q Crew's Instagram at the Q Crew Productions. Subscribe, like the video, comment. What do you got to say? Did you like this movie? Did you not like it? What do you think? But yeah, that's it for me. This has been my father. This is my father, Jeff. And we will see you on the next one. Peace.
Thank you.